Welcome to This Explainer. Today we are pulling back the curtain on a massive American icon to reveal its true origins. We're going to completely deconstruct the mythology of the Wild West and uncover a rich, hidden history that Hollywood has honestly entirely overshadowed. Let's jump right in. So who really invented the American cowboy? Think about that for a second. When you picture a cowboy, what immediately pops into your head? You probably envision a lone, rugged figure in a Stetson hat riding across endless, dusty plains, lasso in hand. Basically the ultimate symbol of the 19th century Wild West. And this image is so deeply ingrained in us by movies and pop culture, it feels undeniably true, right? But what if I told you to completely challenge that image? Consider where those traditions actually began. Because the foundation of the American West tells a vastly different story than the one we're used to seeing on the big screen. Okay, let's dive into this. Let's look at the stark contrast between the myth and the reality. The Hollywood myth is firmly planted in the 19th century. It's predominantly Anglo-American and usually defined by a really simple black and white conflict. Settlers versus indigenous groups. But the Vaquero reality, it's an entirely different beast. The true foundation of the cowboy lifestyle is pre-19th century. It is deeply rooted in Spanish-Mexican heritage, and it was a rich, complex cultural melting pot. The reality is that the tools, the vocabulary, and the very way of life we associate with cowboys, they were crafted long before the classic American cowboy literally ever appeared on the scene. To really get our heads around this, we use something called the Arch Territory Ecological Knowledge Framework. Now, don't let that academic term intimidate you. It's basically a methodology that analyzes historical artifacts, territory, and ecological knowledge. Think of it as our detective lens. We're using it to unearth this hidden history, strip away all those Hollywood embellishments, and reveal the incredible Spanish-Mexican foundations of the American West. It guides us to look past the tall tales and find the tangible, boots-on-the-ground realities left behind by the very first pioneers of the region. If we take a look at the timeline and actually map this backwards, the truth becomes undeniably clear. Popular media always zeroes in on the 1880s, the famous Wild West. Step back a bit to the 1850s and we see the major Anglo-American arrival. But keep going. Look all the way back to the pre-1800s. This right here is the era of the Spanish-Mexican vaqueros. They were the original architects of the region's identity. They set the blueprint for the West generations, literally generations, before the classic American cowboy ever saddled a horse. So, how exactly did they set that blueprint? Well, let's look at the origins of some iconic tools, the actual physical elements that made survival and success on the frontier even possible. Now, what's totally fascinating about this is that practically every single piece of iconic gear you associate with the cowboy was actually perfected by Hispanic riders. Lariats, spurs, chaps, deep-seated saddles, even the whole concept of an open-range roundup. None of these were Anglo innovations, no way. They were born out of sheer necessity and refined by Spanish-Mexican vaqueros who were managing vast herds across the incredibly difficult, harsh terrain of the Southwest and southern Colorado canyons. The Anglo-American cowboy just adopted what the vaqueros had already completely mastered. It's a real game changer when you think about it. To really grasp the scale of this, we have to shift our focus to the geography of southern Colorado, specifically Las Ánimas County. The Ardea Zerotech framework teaches us that history isn't just written in books, it's recorded right there in the dirt. The land itself serves as a primary historical record, a sort of living archive that preserves the legacy of these early pioneers in ways a textbook simply cannot capture.
And nowhere is this cultural memory more beautifully preserved than in the names given to the land itself. Consider this magnificent Spanish place name, Rio de las Ánimas Perdidas en el Purgatorio, which translates to the River of Lost Souls in Purgatory. This isn't just a geographical marker on a map. It's a powerful form of cultural preservation that whispers of the past, marking the undeniable presence of a complex Spanish-Mexican population long before Hollywood cameras ever started rolling. As researcher Franco Arteceros puts it so beautifully, the landscape holds memories in every crevice and curve. And this brilliantly illustrates that this history isn't just some abstract concept. It is etched directly into the physical land. When you walk through the dusty trails of this region today, you are quite literally walking through the physical echoes of the vaqueros.
You can see and feel these physical echoes absolutely everywhere in Las Ánimas County. The rugged canyons still bear the marks of where these original horsemen drove massive herds. The ancient stone plazas where they gathered, they still seem to echo with the sounds of their voices and horses' hooves. The hidden canyon breaks provided the harsh, unforgiving backdrop where the vaqueros perfected their legendary skills. The sensory details of this landscape are honestly the truest record we have of their incredible resilience. But, it wasn't just about man versus nature. It was also a complex cultural melting pot. We need to completely defy the standard frontier myths that portray a simple black and white divide between settlers and indigenous groups. The vaquero reality was vastly different.
Just take the region around Trinidad, Colorado. This area wasn't a site of simple two-sided conflict. It was a landscape of constant negotiation. Spanish, Mexican, indigenous, and eventually Anglo traditions all fused together here. They merged their skills, their languages, and their customs to create an entirely unique frontier identity. It was a true cultural melting pot centered on adaptation and sheer survival in a really tough environment. And here's another thing. Media loves to portray this sharp, violent divide between cattle ranchers and sheep herders, right? So the crucial point is that this media trope completely ignores the vaqueros' incredible versatility. The reality? They were masters of both. These early inhabitants didn't pick sides. They expertly managed massive cattle herds right alongside vast flocks of sheep, or borregos, across the mesas. Their whole way of life was defined by versatility, not by the rigid tropes you see on TV. So as we wrap up this explainer, we really have to recognize that the true blueprint of the American West isn't found in some Hollywood studio. It's a living legacy, and it's found in the dirt, the tools, and the identity of regions like Las Animas County. By applying this Artis-Aristec framework and reclaiming this neglected history, we honor the vaqueros as the original architects of the West's most iconic traditions. Their heritage remains completely embedded in the land itself, proving that history is vastly more complex and frankly a lot richer than the simplified stories we've been told. The vaqueros are just one incredible example of a reality hiding beneath a myth. Geography is a living archive, and history is etched into the very ground we walk on. So I'll leave you with this thought. What other legends are hiding in the land around you? Look closer at your local geography, question the standard myths, and you know what? You might just uncover a story that changes everything you thought you knew.